got to a point where everything was fine and I was ticking a lot of boxes and I could see the path ahead for myself, but I just had this sense of, is this it? And I had this quiet voice that kept coming to me that kept saying, I want to work for myself and I want to work from anywhere. So June 2022, I booked a one-way flight to Valencia in Spain and I joined a tech startup at the time. And I said, right, I want to work for myself. I want to work from anywhere. Let's go. You go typically from working in a team in a company, maybe 50 people, maybe 500, maybe like me, 5,000. All of a sudden you're left to your own devices. Everything you have to do yourself. You need to really speak to your customers and understand, is what you're offering something they really want? And not just that. They may say, I really want this, but will they pay for it?
Are there like some specific traits or characteristics that stick out to you as not only somebody who is capable of being an entrepreneur, but also capable of being a successful entrepreneur?
I love that. So the first thing that comes to mind is
welcome to or welcome back to Founders in Jeans. I'm your host, Emily Jean. And before we get into the episode, I just want to say a huge thank you so much for listening to my podcast. It means the world to me. It is a really special project to me. It's very close to my heart. And I just wanted to come on here and say thank you so much. I also wanted to say that if you enjoy the show, feel free to leave a review on Spotify or Apple, wherever you're listening to this, and also to follow us. You can follow us on Spotify, of course. You can follow us on Instagram at Founders in Jeans. You can also find me on Instagram at emily.jeans, or you can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect with people on there, and I have a lot of good conversations from listeners. Also, you can always leave a bad review for us. I'm totally fine with that. And in fact, I think that's exciting. I would love to know what we can do to improve. So you can also leave comments below and let me know what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy. I actually do read every single one. We also have a newsletter that comes out once a week, so you can get all the updates from us. We also put in some weekly business and marketing updates, as well as some personal notes from me. You can subscribe to that on my LinkedIn, also through the Instagram and in the show notes below. Anyways, that is all from me. I'm so excited for you to listen to this episode. I hope it's a good one, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye. Well, Niluka, welcome to Founders in Jeans. I am so excited to chat to you today. For people who don't know you, why don't you give a little bit of a background about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me, Emily. So going right back, I'm from the UK originally. I studied at Oxford and started off my career in quite a conventional route. So I went into consulting at a big four firm, actually had a really good experience there, worked in different teams, sales, marketing, brand, which might be interesting for you, commercial management, a little bit of etc., customer. And then after like maybe 4 or 5 years, I got to a point where everything was fine and I was ticking a lot of boxes and I could see the path ahead for myself, but I just had this sense of, is this it? And I had this quiet voice that kept coming to me that kept saying, I want to work for myself and I want to work from anywhere. And it kept coming up and up over and over again. And at the time I was in my mid-20s or so, and I realized if I don't do this now, it's going to get harder. I'm going to get more pay, more money. And the funny thing is, when I spoke to some of the wonderful people in my company, directors, partners, even though they wanted me to stay, they were also like, yeah, I wish I had done something similar. So 2022, I booked a one-way flight to Valencia in Spain and I joined a tech startup at the time. And I said, right, I want to work for myself. I want to work from anywhere. Let's go. Let's see how this experiment goes. And since then, over 3 years later, I've lived in 14 places around the world. And I've had a tech startup, which we took to market, a public speaking coaching business. And all of that led me to create Imagine That, which is my community for founders. And it's specifically for people who've been in corporate like I was, who want to start their own thing, but they don't really know how. And also, they don't have that sense of belonging. And we can maybe talk a bit more about that if you're interested. But I just thought, what do I wish I had when I started out? And honestly, it is that community, that sense of belonging, that mentoring, that sense of I can do this and there's other people around me doing it too. And that led me to create Imagine That. As well as Imagine That, I'm also a speaker in the keynote space in future of work and also advise leaders in this space as well. So I kind of have that corporate hat as well as the founder hat.
I have so many questions for you and so many things I want to talk to you about. I want to start off in a bit of a random spot, though. I just want to say that I really like the name Imagine That. I listened to a podcast today with Stephen Bartlett, and he was talking about how a sign of a successful entrepreneur is one that believes that the world is malleable and moldable. And that basically, like, if you can dream it or think of it, you can do it. And that belief is like integral. So I think that it is such an encouraging idea to have a community of founders going, I want to do this thing, and being able to have people to rely on it to say it's actually possible and we're all going to do it together. So I think that's a brilliant thing. So take me back a little bit though. Outside of Imagine That and what you're doing now, your first kind of foray into entrepreneurship, what was that first step look like? What was the transition look like? And why, I guess, was that the moment to do it?
So, in terms of the moment to do it, I think I was at a point where I wasn't burnt out. I didn't have any bad manager or toxic culture, but I was being pulled towards something. And I always say to people, it wasn't a push decision. Like, I hate my job. I hate what I'm doing. I'm so miserable. And it was more a pull decision towards something. And as I say, it was a sense of why not try an experiment and take a risk while I have the opportunity? And I'm a big believer in regret minimalization. And I knew that if I didn't do this in 5 years, 10 years' time, I might be a director or a partner, but I would regret not trying something else. I've also very much been drawn to entrepreneurship as a whole. I think partly because I'm slightly strange, and I think many entrepreneurs are a little bit strange, actually. They like to go against the grain, they like to think differently, they're not worried about, challenging the status quo. When I was at KPMG, which was the firm I worked at, I was a bit of an intrapreneur, and that's something I help with companies as well in terms of entrepreneurship because when I was there, I was building internally. So I was building our behavioral science unit. I was building a tech initiative internally. But it got to a point where I was like, okay, now let's do it myself. Let's see what I'm capable of. Um, I also had started my public speaking business while working. And I always say to people, people think like, oh, do I have to quit everything and then start from scratch? No, I love the idea, as long as there's not a conflict of interest with your company. I love the idea of starting to validate, thinking of the idea, you know, testing it before you then leave. And that's what I did with my public speaking business.
Did you ever read the book? I think it's Outliers. Did you ever read that or hear about that?
Outliers, tell me more.
Yeah, it's a book. He has a TED Talk as well that basically is a summarization of the book, but it's discussing different successful brands and like what made them successful. And he talks about in that we have this idea of it's this entrepreneur that quits college or quits their 9 to 5 like that, and they just are working on it and, pulling themselves up by the what's the word? String of their shoes,
Yeah,
whatever,
something like that.
something like that. And anyways, he says actually the most successful businesses are the ones where people took the measured time to save up the money and to kind of prove market fit, and then made the ultimate decision to leave their business. So very insightful, and I think also makes it a lot more approachable for founders to think of it that way. Doesn't
Yeah,
have to be that scary thing.
absolutely. I mean, I took so much pressure off myself when I left corporate because I said I'm going on an experiment. I literally did a LinkedIn post that said, I'm taking an experiment to work myself and see the world. And doing that was so useful because it gave me permission to test, to try things out, to see what works, to see what doesn't. And I always say to founders in the Imagine That community, validate, 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 validate. I think that's the biggest thing I see founders not do. And I've been guilty of it myself as well. You need to really speak to your customers and understand, is what you're offering something they really want? And not just that, they may say on a call, let's say you're doing a market research call, I really want this, but will they pay for it? Right? Like there's lots of different things you have to validate early on. So it's really important. But yeah, take the pressure off if you can.
Yeah. And what was the particular attraction to public speaking? Like, why was that your interest there?
Great question. One of those strange people that loves presenting.
Hmm.
And most people hate it. I think it's listed as one of the top fears, like including spiders and heights. And I've always really enjoyed it. So when I was in corporate, whenever they were looking for someone to host an event, and most people were like, please don't pick me, please don't pick me. I was like, please pick me. So I ended up doing a lot of speaking in my company. And I just really enjoy it. Maybe it comes from my days, I did a little bit of drama when I was younger and all of this at school. And as I was doing that, people were coming to me saying, you're really good. I wish I was that good. How can I become better? All of this. And I was like, this is really interesting. I can charge for this. Like
Hmm.
people want to pick my brains. They want me to give them feedback. Why am I not doing something with it? So that led me to create Help Me Present. And that started off doing one-on-one coaching and one-on-one training with individuals, but it actually evolved to then doing workshops for companies and for their teams. So it actually weirdly went back into corporate in a strange way, but me on the other side of it.
Yeah, I love that too because I also love public speaking. I'm one of those weirdos. It makes me so happy. I think it's just I'm a big attention seeker personally, and I need all eyes on me.
Yeah, probably the same as me. That's why we've got our podcast.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good trait to have, I think. Um, Speaking of that, you have worked with now lots of founders in your community. So I'm curious for you, are there like some specific traits or characteristics that stick out to you as not only somebody who is capable of being an entrepreneur, but also capable of being a successful entrepreneur?
I love that. So the first thing that comes to mind is curiosity.
Mm,
So curiosity can mean a lot of things, but in this context, it means those who are able to see a space and think, why is this not done this way? Or what could I do to make this better? Or why is this working like this? And then they come in, they see a problem there, and then they find a way to solve it. I think curiosity and with the future of workspace is going to become more and more key and in demand as a skill. You mentioned then successful founder, and I really like that you mentioned that because, the stats do show that most entrepreneurs do fail. I've had failed businesses as well. What I see and what I think is true for the ones that have done very well is they're incredibly malleable and they're really sensitive to looking at the feedback and the data.
uh,
And they understand what is working, what's not working. For want of a better phrase, they don't try to flog a dead horse, right? If something isn't working, they'll shift it, they'll pivot, they'll change, and they'll go from there. And I think that is the best skill. And not everyone has that skill. Unfortunately, if you've been in corporate for a very long time, and I've seen this as well, you can be quite stuck in your ways and you want a thing to work and you just kind of try and force it. And that can be really dangerous. So I would
uh,
say curiosity and being malleable, listening to feedback, being able to adapt, shift, change when needed.
I think that kind of open mindedness that you're speaking about too is probably sort of centered too around the community aspect, right? And being open to not only listening to others' opinions, but actually sharing what you're struggling with or, what are your wins. So Talk to me about this community of founders and how have you seen people be helped by that and supported by that? And what was your ultimate goal when you started that?
Yeah. So I think something that is a real danger for a lot of entrepreneurs and something that I experienced myself, which is why I wanted to create this. They say try to create something that solves a problem you experience, is isolation and being in a silo and being in a bubble. You go typically from working in a team in a company, maybe 50 people, maybe 500, maybe like me, 5,000. All of a sudden, you're left to your own devices. There's no one to call up in the operations department to test what you're doing. There's no one in HR to ask their questions. Like, there's no one in finance. Everything you have to do yourself. You are wearing so many different hats: marketing, sales, customer ops, finance, whatever it might be. And that can be incredibly isolating because you have no one to draw on. Secondly, you can very much end up in your own bubble with tunnel vision. You're building this thing, and because there's no one really around you apart from your mum and your friends saying it's great, you end up in this bubble that can be a very dangerous space. So the community really aims to solve that. It aims to help with the expertise that people might be lacking and missing in the early days. So we bring in experts to help with that, and we run masterclasses. But it's also to help with the second aspect, which is around, oh my gosh, I'm on my own and I don't know if what I'm doing is right. I need feedback. I need someone to kind of say, not this, this instead. And so that's why we have our founder roundtables and thinking hours where entrepreneurs can come in and basically help each other. And also the feedback I've got from some people is that it's also like therapy for them, and it's, motivational and accountable and all of this. But the fact that they have others that they can talk to, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not on this journey on my own.
Yeah. I want to ask about LinkedIn because I'm curious if this plays a role in that as well. Obviously grown a platform and an audience and a community on LinkedIn. Does that kind of play a role there? What was the decision to focus on LinkedIn as a platform? And how does that fit into the puzzle?
I look at LinkedIn as like a brand building asset. So if you've been on my LinkedIn, you'll see that I speak about the community and imagine that. But I also have my speaking on there. I have some of my future of work advisory on there. I look at it as a brand building asset. Why LinkedIn? It's a really good question. I think of all the platforms, LinkedIn feels the one where you can be credible. So I don't know if you're on Instagram. I am on Instagram, but sometimes I'll see an advert like you can make 10K a day through digital products. And I'm always very skeptical of this. I think if that same person came to LinkedIn and did that, they would probably be interrogated a lot more. And so I like it as a platform because you can't really fake it that much. Like you have to be good. People are going to look into what you're doing. They're going to look into your background. And so I think it's a great place if you have the credibility and you have that, then it's a really good place to show up. I think that's why it's my primary platform. And also, I just love the fact that you have access to so many people across the world who are open to meeting. And I think that's fantastic. And it feels like it has more substance compared to an Instagram or a TikTok, which tends to be more entertainment focused.
Uh-huh.
LinkedIn is entertainment sometimes, but it's also people are looking for value. They're looking to learn something. They're looking to be educated.
Right. I think one of the biggest concerns that I'm hearing right now from founders and entrepreneurs from the podcast and on LinkedIn is that lack of community that we're speaking about, which I think is why platforms like your own and, groups like your own and also LinkedIn, why those are growing right now is people want to connect more with each other. I'm curious though, what are the biggest concerns that you're hearing from entrepreneurs right now and founders? And what is your response to some of those?
It's a good question. And also, just to circle back to what you just said, I think with AI and tech, we're going to crave community, relationships, meaningful conversations like this more than ever. So, what are some of the questions that I'm being asked in the community, right? and what are people struggling with. The thing I hear the most is getting those first clients. So, or users, if you're building a SaaS business, whatever it might be. That often is a place where people are stuck, and rightly so. They've never done this before. That is something that a lot of our sessions focus on in terms of sales, product market fit. How do you get in front of your ideal customer? What platforms do you choose, etc. I think that's a question that comes up a lot in our sessions. Another question that comes up a lot is, I wouldn't say it's actually so much a question. It's more a sense of doubt.
Mm,
Am I doing this right? And what founders in the community have said is they really value being part of something where people are not just coming in and being like, I'm great and I did this and I did this, because you do see that a lot on LinkedIn, right? We all share our highlights on LinkedIn. We're not really sharing everything going on behind it. So having that space, I see a lot of the founders coming in and saying like, this week has just been tough for me motivationally.
mm,
Or I was so excited for like these 3 sales calls and I got 1, but the other 2 didn't work. And I'm like gutted, or whatever it might be. I think that's something I see a lot of the founders using. Like, has anyone else been in this boat? Like, what helped you get through it? Like, I feel overwhelmed. What's helped you? Or I'm feeling like I'm having a confidence dip. How do I navigate that?
mhm.
I think that's something as well that people enjoy in the community.
Yeah. Are you hearing many concerns about AI? I think it's interesting with founders and entrepreneurs, there's a sense of excitement as opposed to someone in your average 9 to 5 working corporate. Are you hearing any concerns though on that end about AI?
Great question. I actually see from the founders them more thinking, how can I use AI to propel me forwards in their business? The people that, if I put my future of work hat on, that are struggling more with AI and are a bit worried tend to be those in corporate companies who are worried about their role and the role evolving and this type of thing. For entrepreneurs, I think it presents an amazing opportunity because the barriers to entry to become a founder have been lowered because of AI. Think about it. Previously, you would have to spend money on hiring an email marketer, or you'd have to spend money on getting someone in to design a website for you. You might still do those things, but there's now AI tools out there that can help do it for you, or at least get you to a point which is at a point where you can then launch. And I think that's really exciting, the amount of time it can save and the amount of learning that people can get from it.
Yeah, I do. We haven't even spoken about future of work yet. So I'd love for you to explain what that is and what does that mean to you?
Yes. Well, future of work is such a big area,
Yeah.
but the area that I specifically focus in on is modern leadership and also entrepreneurship. So, what do I mean by those two things? And a little bit of employee engagement as well. So, modern leadership. Coming from a corporate background and seeing the changes happening now, I see that a lot of leaders are very much stuck in ways of 2012. 2012. So they're very much operating on a basis of, yes, I know the world of work is changing. Yes, I'm a good leader, but they're still operating like they are 10 years ago plus. And so, especially with the younger generation and Gen Z, they have different demands. They want to be led differently. They see the world differently. They see work differently. They need to have meaning at work. So, how do leaders actually adapt to that? And how do they lead with this modern approach? The second area is around entrepreneurship and innovation. So a lot of companies now are saying we need to innovate, we need creativity. But then when you look at the culture, they're not creating the right environment where employees can actually innovate, they can create. And that's really interesting for me because I've had businesses, I've been in corporate. So I try to bring some of the lessons of startups into companies and help them. Okay, you don't need to have 10 layers of approval necessarily. Can we cut this down, this type of thing? And the mindset needed to really allow employees to innovate and to say, hey, why don't we do this? Or wouldn't this be cool? And then the third area is really around employee engagement and how do you keep people engaged at a time where, let's face it, anyone can, if they want and if they have that risk appetite, can say, I want to start a business and go. So how do you actually keep your employees engaged and really like believing in the work that you're doing.
I just heard something recently about how more employees than ever are switching jobs continuously and quickly. And also, it just intertwines with that a conversation with a friend about a corporate job that she works, and her higher ups have been putting so much pressure on her to post on LinkedIn about her job and what she does day to day. I think there's a really interesting overlap there, although I'm not quite sure what it is. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Mm, so interesting that they are asking her to post on LinkedIn and using her personal account, I imagine, not the company account.
Mhm.
I think that's really interesting because companies are seeing, and rightly so, their employees as possible brand ambassadors. But as we know on LinkedIn, authenticity and showing up as a real person is really what works, not just I'm working at this company and this is why they're great. I have a friend of mine, he's at a financial services firm, and his posts are so like by the book about the
Mm,
company that no one is engaging. At the same time, you can't, spill all the details of the company onto LinkedIn. So it's really interesting. I have a couple of friends who are experts in the LinkedIn space who can probably talk to that more than me, and they work with companies on LinkedIn specifically. But if I go back to employee engagement, what creates genuine employee engagement that actually gets them to want to post on LinkedIn? And when I was at KPMG, I was posting on LinkedIn, not because no one told me about it, but because I felt that I had enough freedom in my role and in the company to enable me to do that.
mhm.
I think I was very engaged as an employee because I could innovate, I could build, I could go to a partner and say, "Hey, I want to create this. What do you think?" There were limits, of course, around budget and other things, but that really made me feel that I'm not just another cog in the wheel. Like I have autonomy. And I think for companies that really want to engage their employees, they need to be thinking about how can we make each individual feel like a mini entrepreneur within the company? How can they feel that they have that freedom to innovate, to operate, to suggest things?
Yeah,
If you give them that, they will go to LinkedIn and say, "Hey, this week," like I did this week in our behavioral science unit, we had this speaker come in. It was great. If you don't give them that and you're like, post on LinkedIn and talk about this, why would they do that? They might do it because they feel obliged, but it's not coming from the heart.
right. Yeah, I think we're at an interesting crossroads right now where employees are probably the least invested in their companies ever. And it's when the companies want their employees to be the most invested ever, especially going back to that like brand ambassador idea. So the investing in and thinking about employee engagement probably could not be more better timed. I want to ask before we wrap up about your podcast. As a fellow podcaster, this is really just me wanting to pick your brain. But how long have you had the podcast, and what was kind of your decision behind that to start one?
Yes. So it's called Breaking Boundaries with Niluka. I started it, you're going to laugh at this. I started it in June 2022 to talk about breaking the boundaries of can I work for myself? Can I work from anywhere? So
Mm,
career boundaries, geographical boundaries. Started off honestly as just a way for me to share that journey. So if you go right back on my channel on YouTube, some of my early videos are like, what's it like working for yourself? Here I am in Croatia, Lisbon, as a nomadic entrepreneur. So it was really very much showing that and sharing that side of things. And then over the years, I would say would, I kind of plateaued a little bit with it because I had seen so much of the world. I'd become very confident in myself as an entrepreneur that I kind of got to a point where I was like, what else can I do and show? Unless I keep forcing myself to go see the world and travel. And I don't want to be a travel creator. There's enough of those out there. And I went back to the name Breaking Boundaries with Naluka. And I thought, enough about me, enough about me. There are so many cool people out there who have broken boundaries, who have done amazing things. let's get them on. Let's talk to them. I'm probably like you, quite a curious person. I love to hear stories of others. So I would want to have these conversations and calls anyway.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's really it. And I started that evolution of the channel last year, last end of summer, early autumn. And I was a bit nervous to do it because it really was a slight change in the direction to go from me sharing my life to sharing other people. But I've really enjoyed it. And I think there's so much we can gain from learning from others.
Yeah, I love that. I also told someone this earlier, but less than 30%, I read somewhere, less than 30% of all podcasts are hosted by women. So it's always so cool to meet like another woman that's doing a podcast because that's a small number of women. And yeah, it just is so cool to be able to learn from different people and hear different voices. And it's such a brilliant outlet. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to ask you a final question before we wrap up. My
Right.
favorite question to ask everyone. Do you have a book or a course or a resource or a podcast that you can recommend to budding entrepreneurs?
I would say 10x is easier than X by Benjamin Hardy and Daniel O'Sullivan. It's a really good book to get out of the thinking that traps a lot of entrepreneurs early on, and that actually allows you to be successful. It's a great book in terms of mindset, but also in terms of practical approaches to running a business.
Okay, that's great. I've not heard that recommendation yet, so that's brilliant.
Yeah, I loved it. I read it at the end of last year and it's really good. And it's also useful, not just for founders, but I think also leaders in companies as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Great. I love it. Well, Niluka, where can people find you? Where can they connect with you?
Absolutely. So LinkedIn is probably the best place. I will also share maybe in the description of this my link tree so people can find the Imagine That community, but they can also go to www.imaginethatclub.com and they will find the community there.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad I got to chat to you. This has been so good. I'm so excited for people to hear this.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun.
And that is wrap.